Welcome, everyone, to the Zorich Podcast. I am Chris Zorich, and on today's show, we have a living legend, Notre Dame living legend, Super Bowl champion, Notre Dame radio analyst, and best-selling author of Mindset Over Mastery, Mr. Ryan Harris. Hello, sir. Thank you so much.
Hey, man, you can't call me a Notre Dame legend when you're sitting there with the mic. Come on, man.
Please, we're all
just walking in the cement footprints you put throughout the campus and beyond.
I'm just saying, man, I was not a 4-year starter. My bad. I had to ride the bench, man. I had to ride the bench, and I was in there when I was 18 years old. I wasn't going up against grown men at 18. So that's all you. I will leave it to you.
And I'll never do it again.
If I had If I had a button, I'd be giving you big time applause because, you know, what you've accomplished in your short life already has just been amazing. I can't wait to talk to you about your bestseller. It's something that, and it's a great read. You could either become a professional athlete or a CEO of a Fortune 500 company with it. I love it. But before we do all that, I want to talk about how you got involved in football, because according to the book, it's a really funny story. Please tell us how you got involved with football.
Yeah, well, you know, I was such a chubby kid back in the day, man. You know, my cheeks came from underneath my glasses, and you know, and I would watch football, and it was often an escape for me, you know, just to go watch the Vikings play. Back in the day, Chris, you remember only one game was probably on Sunday, you know, no yellow lines, as I had to explain to my wife, you know, to tell you what a first down was. Sometimes you didn't know the score for half the quarter. But I fell in love with the game, and a credit to my father, Kevin Harris. I asked him every question. My first question about football was around the kickoffs, you know, why do the guys run into each other? Why doesn't they just run around, you know? And but then I got to see my grandfather had tickets to Vikings games. I got to see Matt Burke, Corbin Lucina, Dennis Dixon, and they were warming up right in front of us. And so for me, I was like, oh my goodness, I can be big. And I tried out for football for the first time in my life at 14. And after the first practice, the coach said, Ryan, if you keep this up, you're going to be really special. And no one had ever told me that before, you know, and then we get I still didn't even know how to hit. So we, you know, those first practices where there aren't, you know, pads, you got to wait for them. So finally we get our pads, and the other big kid at the time, friend of mine, he goes, hey, Ryan, let's go heads up. I'm like, nah, man, I'm good. He's like, come on, man, what's wrong? You scared? I'm like, no, I'm not scared. He's like, what's wrong? I'm like, we can't tell anybody, but, you know, I don't know how to hit. And so he, of course, falls out laughing, turns to the rest of the team, guys, Ryan Harris doesn't know how to hit, and everybody's just dying, you know, and I go to get picked up, and I'm thinking to myself that whole night, like, I'm just going to show up. I don't care. You know, I'm going to show up. And so sure enough, I show up the next day, and whether I wasn't standing near anybody or they weren't standing near me, whatever it was, but a cornerback actually got an interception towards the end of practice. And I ran, and I just closed my eyes, and I left my feet, and it turns out I knew how to hit as that quarterback was laid out. So that was kind of the one and only time anybody laughed at me about not knowing how to hit. And it just was such a crystallizing moment for me of perception and past does not have any bearing on ability, possibility, capability in your future.
Sure. Absolutely. You know, I mean, how many young kids are out there who don't have opportunities like that, who, if by chance, really understand, hey, what if I can? And I think that's a great story. And it's kind of interesting because when you talk about not being able to hit, and considering you became a 4-year starter at Notre Dame, it's just a whole different story. But I can't wait to get into that. But first of all, I want to know, were you a hooper? You know, did you play baseball? Was that your only sport, football, or how'd that work out?
Yeah. I like to say I was so good at basketball, I wrestled, you know, so I was a wrestler in high school to let others, you know, have the limelight. And then I played baseball. I loved baseball. But you know, at about my sophomore year, after my sophomore year, I kind of had to make a choice, and either I could train and really get a shot at playing, you know, D1 ball, or I could continue to have fun. But make no mistake, those years spent wrestling changed my life and made me a great football player. The patience at the plate of baseball really taught me about, what a pitcher has, which I really equated to being an offensive tackle, right? You can't throw a fastball the whole time. You have to change it up, or a guy like Zorich is going to tear you down, if you just come after him the same time. So I learned so much. And one of my biggest things these days, and I'm sure we share this, kids are specializing way too early. Right. And if I didn't wrestle, if I wasn't a bad player and I didn't know how to be a good teammate, that would have really affected me down the road. And really affected my overall success.
Yeah. And it's funny because, I'm sure folks ask you all the time. They ask me, and hey, what should my kid do? What should my kid do? I'm like, well, first of all, let them have fun.
Yeah.
Let he or she enjoy it. Don't pressure them. And oftentimes, again, I'm sure you run into this, a lot of times it's the frustrated athletic parents that didn't play in college and want to see their dreams come through their kids. And it's ridiculous. Like, well, I'm taking my kid to 4 different sports. I'm like, wait a minute, does he enjoy them? Oh, I don't know. Like, well, who is this for? Is it for your kid or is it for you?
Yeah. And, one story about my neighbor, she came up to me, she said, Ryan, got to talk to you. You got time? Yeah, absolutely. And she said, my son, he got onto an elite hockey team, and it's going to be $1,300 a month. I'm going to have to take him 45 minutes across town for 5:30 a.m. practices 3 times a week. What do you think I should do? I said, how old's your son again? She said, 11. I said, listen, right now, I can tell you there are no elite hockey teams at 11. That's somebody making you pay for that. And I said, listen, what you have to fight right now is burnout. I don't know if this happened for you, Chris, but like for me, when I got to Notre Dame, even there was about 5 cats on the team who had shut it down. They were burnt out. And I said, you have to fight burnout. And especially as a hockey family, your decision isn't to go into an 11-year-old elite team. Your decision is going to be, does my son graduate high school early to go play juniors? And so many times parents, she just looked back at me and she didn't. She didn't put him in that. And I said, he needs to get a job at the movie theater, or, he needs to play lacrosse or do anything else. Right. Because what happens that you and I see, these parents, well, I've been paying $1,500 a month so that you can play basketball, volleyball. And at 17, the kid goes, I don't want to play this anymore. Well, now you've paid the equal amount to half of a college career, and you got nothing out of it but animosity. You got to let your kids play different sports. You got to let them suck. You have to let them fail, because what Chris and I know, at some point, they're going to go against guys like us who we will eat their lunch for free and not think about it at all. And you can't help them in that moment. They've got to want it. They've got to want to fight back. They've got to want to come back and show up. And you can't teach that by drilling them in, at 11 and 12-year-old practices as if Tom Brady's carrying around his 11-year-old trophy. Stop it.
Right. Well, it really includes a couple things to think about when you say that. One, I think we screwed everybody up when we started giving participation trophies to every kid. And it's interesting because when you say you had cats shut it down in school, I remember there were a couple guys, and we were just kind of sitting around. The guy's like, "Yeah, I'm done." I'm like, "What are you telling me you're done?" He's like, "Well, I got a scholarship. I'm good." I was like, "Dude, I've been playing since I was 10." I'm like, "Really?" And one dude was like, "Man, I've been playing since I was 8." And I'm like, "Oh my God!" I didn't start playing until sophomore year in high school.
Yeah.
So, I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And then all of a sudden you're like, you're going to shut it down. I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm not going to make it to the pros. So I'm good. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
And what's also funny is like, we don't train our kids to be astronauts at 11, right? Like we don't train them to do other things like that. Like, why is it sports? If your son wants to be an astronaut, you're not sending him to anti-gravity training right now at 11. Like, you would be ridiculous. And what most parents don't realize is exactly what you said. It's the parents that didn't have the athletic career or lied about their athletic career and somehow want their kid to want it. And that's just, for me, I want my kids to have fun. I got 3 kids, and I want them to have fun. I want them to put themselves in different positions. I got them in jujitsu. They're 7 and 5, and then my youngest is 2. He's not there yet. But they need other life skills to make them capable in moments where they're going to need to be successful. And it's just shocking to me how, we don't have 11-year-olds doing, political races to practice being president,
Like to be a lawyer, that's not happening. All right. So let's fast forward a little bit. I'm sure you had a great high school career. Let's fast forward a little bit. So were you highly recruited? Did you get recruited by Notre Dame? What other schools were you looking at?
I was looking at Miami, Michigan, USC, and Stanford. And, for me, Tyrone, Willingham, coming into the house, my grandfather did most of the recruiting for him. The Wiley vet there was my recruiting coordinator. But it was Notre Dame was something different. I loved Miami. Don't get me wrong. They brought me down. I'm a Minnesota kid, and they brought me down at the end of November, and there were women in bikinis jumping into the ocean where we had the first steak I ever had in my life. I was going to the U, right? But I began to notice, how when I told people, hey, I'm thinking about Miami, Michigan, Stanford, USC, Notre Dame, they'd be like, oh, Notre Dame, huh? And I was like,
right. Like some great schools, right? You just named some great schools.
Yeah, I'm just like
all they heard was Notre Dame.
Yeah, and then two things happened that I think are so indicative of Notre Dame. One, on my unofficial visit, they beat Michigan and they stormed the field, and a man who I've still not met to this day taps me on the shoulder and he says, I know who you are, I know why you're here. When you come to Notre Dame, you're a part of the family, you're more than your number. And he walked away.
Wow.
And then also on my official recruiting trip, I am Muslim. I'm the only Muslim in my family, but Notre Dame was the only school to take me to a mosque on my official visit.
Wow.
And that to me just was so powerful to think about the largest Catholic institution outside of the Vatican, not only understood how important faith was, but wanted to make sure I knew that I could grow in my faith as a Muslim at Notre Dame. And that's a testament to Notre Dame, everybody I've met at Notre Dame, and to the athletic department that really goes beyond, getting the star recruit in there and really listens to the person. And those two moments had a huge effect on me.
That's amazing. And it brings me to think about when I was at Notre Dame, we recruited this kid named Rocket Ishmael. And everybody's talking about, hey, he's going to come to Notre Dame. And all the guys are like, what is he talking about? He's a Muslim. I mean, how's he going to come? We're kind of laughing, joking about that. Same thing, right? I mean, they wound up going out of their comfort zone. And at that time, we're talking about the late 80s.
Yeah.
And there weren't a lot of mosques in South Bend, right? So I'm sure at one point when he made that decision, it was because they went above and beyond the call and found him someplace that he could be comfortable in doing what was important to him. And we all thought that was amazing, even though, I mean, I think at that point, he may have been the only our only Muslim teammate.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things, too, is Notre Dame is the only place where I felt that spirituality was understood in terms of, if it's Ramadan and I say, hey, guys, we got to go to a later movie time so I get these prayers in. If I'm at Miami, that's not a conversation that's getting had. And at USC, probably not the conversation. But at Notre Dame, it's completely understood. So this sense that you could be spiritual and you could dominate on the football field and in the classroom, I want that, and I want more of it.
Amazing. So Tyrone knocks on the door. You have to, I mean, what was that like? The head coach of Notre Dame in your living room? And by the way, he's black, which was amazing.
Which at that time, I think there were only two black coaches in all of college football. And Coach Willingham, and I love this man, and I love him and Coach Weis to this day, and we still keep in touch. But he walks in with the fedora on and the peak coat, and he's slowly walking, and there was an aura around him, and excellence was his expectation, and that's so drawing, and in the style of recruiting, he said, and he talks in that funny voice, Ron, I know you're looking at Miami, and you may be distracted by the swimsuits they wear down there. But I'll tell you what, no one gets into a bikini faster than women in the Midwest. So I'm like, I'm like, well, heck, if I could get Miami in South, but not one bikini, Chris. I didn't see not one bikini at Notre Dame.
Absolutely not happening.
The lies told during recruiting, but Tyrone Willingham has just been a mentor to me. He was from the beginning, and it was something that just to see myself in somebody who could be themselves at Notre Dame. And that just meant so much to me, so much to my family. And that's what we miss when we talk about inclusion. We think, oh, it's somebody taking a job. No, what we're doing is expanding the exception, which brings you more talent. It literally brings you 19% increase in revenue when you hire and retain diverse talent. I mean, this is how Notre Dame has been successful since way back when Alabama didn't get the national championship because Notre Dame did have African-American on their team.
Mm-hmm. The interesting, one of my interesting experiences with Coach Willingham, I was in law school when he wound up actually taking over the job. And he called me up, and I had been in that head coach's office thousands of times. Some are mostly good things, but a couple bad times. But every time I went in there, I was like scared as shit. I mean, I was terrified. And I walked in there and I heard Sade playing in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked in and I was like, where did I just, and I told him that. And I was like, I'm sorry. I've been in this office many a times, gotten yelled at, some nice things happen, but never have I walked in there. Would I ever assume I would hear Sade in the background? But I walk in and Sade, I was like, and he was kind of laughing. We sat down and talked. Great individual. Great. So I can imagine having a chance to play for him was just a great experience.
Well, and I saw him before while we were at Super Bowl 50 when I was with the Broncos, and I said, "Hey, Coach, can I get some dinner?" He said, "Absolutely." So we went out to eat, and he just gave me, some other pieces. He just said, "Hey, man, the team that wins this game is not going to be distracted." And sure enough, we went through the week, and we saw the Carolina Panthers were, going out and hanging out and staying out a couple extra nights, and we were like, "Hey, when we win, we might not come home for a week. It might be that way." And
right, exactly.
And just to have that kind of a connection with Coach Willingham, it made a difference that got me into Notre Dame. And he's a large part of the reason why I was successful to start my career.
Amazing. Speaking about your career, 4-year starter, come on. I mean, not very many people do that. How does a 18-year-old snotty-nosed kid from Minnesota get to be a starter at Notre Dame their first year? Explain that to me, please.
Yeah,
really good. I mean, come on.
Well, and I was 271 pounds. That's a tough. That's a toot in the wind right there. I think for me, my whole entire NFL career, and it's spilled into as I look back, a constant theme. I don't accept excuses or other people's answers. I'm here to play football. Now I was in phenomenal shape. I outran everybody. I couldn't be worn down. And I also got in a fight the first night we were there over in the snack line. You know what I'm saying? Because the seniors wanted to pick me and a line of freshmen to start going in front of me. Well, no, man, we're swinging. And so I didn't know that it was impossible. I just knew that I could do everything I was able to do to succeed. And I just kept going. And finally, Coach Denbrock brought me into his office and said, "You want to play?" I said, "Yep." He goes, "This year?" He goes, "Yep." And he goes, "Okay, well, we'll see what we can do." And that week I ended up starting at Pittsburgh, and we set the singles game rushing record with Julius Jones that still stands today. And it's a time in which I'll never forget.
And so I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of this attitude you have kind of walking into Notre Dame. And you talk a lot about it in your book, Mindset Over Mastery. And I guess at 18, do you understand what's going on with kind of these leadership qualities that are coming in? You got vets over here, you got freshmen over here. I mean, what's that like? And do you have this idea of kind of what I want and what I need to do in order to get it?
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's a great question looking at it. For me, I learned early that what I wanted and what I was willing to work for is all that mattered. You know, being a multiracial kid, I mean, even, you know, within parts of my own family, I wasn't black enough. You know, at school, I was never black enough. And I was always, you know, or I was black to my white friends. So I from an early age had to realize it's not about fitting in. It's about doing what you want. And a lot of time that people spent trying to fit in, I was working. And that ended up being the difference as you continue to, okay, now you're going to college. Well, do you want to be friends with the freshmen or do you want to be friends? I don't care about being friends. I'm here to play football. So you can begin to see how that time kind of, it's kind of like, you know, compound interest, just compounded my own interest, just continued to separate me. But, you know, I got knocked out of my cleat in one of my, you know, the first week and a half at Notre Dame. And I had to get my mind right. And that night I was reading the book of 5 Rings, and I just was so intent on defeating. And you know, Chris, the drill where you heads up against a defensive lineman, you got to drive him out. The running back runs right or left. And I fired out, and had Kyle Buttenzak done anything or any swim move, I'd have been on my back. But I got underneath him and drove him back. And in that moment, I realized that my mindset was the only thing holding me back. And so I made a decision right there that I would choose my mindset in everything. I'm not going to go to college. I'm going to graduate college. And I want 2 degrees. And I want to graduate college in 3.5 years. So I'm going to go talk to the guidance counselor, you know. And when I talked to her, she said, Ryan, you're one of 3 players the last 10 years that has come in their freshman season and asked me how to put a plan together to graduate. And just for me, choosing my mindset was the difference in every aspect of my life. And whether that's, you know, recognizing distractions, understanding what's not important. This is how I went through Notre Dame and then eventually into the NFL.
So one of the challenging things, I had a chance to experience this on the professional level, but when your head coach is removed from their position, there's a lot of doubt. There's a lot of, you know, hey, am I going to be here? Hey, is he going to want me? The person coming in. But more importantly, you talked about this connection that you had with Coach Willingham. I mean, share with us a little bit about what happened in the locker room, like when no one knew, right? Where there was a transition. And again, it's not the fault of the players that this happened, but how does it happen for a young 18, 20-year-old kid in college? How did they accept that?
You know, it was so unique, and you really are exposed right away to the fact of longevity, right? I mean, longevity, you say longevity to any adult and they laugh because it's just like, yeah, longevity doesn't exist, but you don't know that. You just went to 4 years of high school. Right. You probably haven't moved from your hometown. You know, I definitely hadn't. And I remember this too. It's another testament to Coach Willingham. You know, I called him. I said, "Hey, Coach, how you doing? Tough day, huh?" And he goes, "Ryan, I never have a tough day. I may have a bad hour or a bad couple of hours, but that's it." Wow. And it's just like, wow. And you know, he let us all know he was going to be okay, which he was. You know, I think he's a golf coach now at a Pac-12 school, right? But for us, it was like, okay, what's the opportunity? And then immediately, you know, we were brought in to talk to, you know, a possible new head coach, and that was Charlie Weis, who was in the way, who literally had to leave the meeting because Tom Brady was waiting outside his door to go over some notes, you know. And so we knew that Charlie Weis had the offense and the connections to the NFL, and we as a team, especially the juniors and seniors, we were so ready to win. Okay. And we would do whatever he asked. And Charlie was such an addition to my growth in terms of expectation, creation, and really your mindset as a team. And so when you talk about, you know, and I understand 100%, you know, kids, am I their guy? Am I that? At that point as a junior, and you know, the transfer rules were very different than they are today. I was committed to Notre Dame. I was going to be there. And if that meant I wasn't going to play, fine. You know, I'm still getting 2 degrees. I'm walking out of here a champ. But I just focused on what I could do, how I could improve. And Charlie Weis ended up catapulting me into becoming a professional because of his offense and because of the film that he brought with him, where I got to watch a lot of Matt Light perform in the NFL.
Well, I could imagine. I mean, someone with his pedigree, with his stature comes in. I mean, everybody has to kind of like, I mean, he walks in, everybody's like quiet, and everybody sits up in the chair like, oh my God, this guy has mastered Tom Brady's mastered what the New England Patriots have done. They won Super Bowls under this guy. This guy can walk on water. And I would assume that was kind of the attitude going in.
Yeah, and his intensity. Coach Willingham was fantastic. And, him and Coach Weis might say the same thing, but they will be said very different ways.
Yeah,
and
sure.
So this, in the NFL, like, it's a different world in that space. And so to be around somebody with that much, that many accomplishments, but also the intensity of a champion was something that was revolutionary for me as a football player, as a student. One of the things Charlie Weis said is, on offense, you have to attack. You have to have a mentality of attacking on every play. No one had ever told me that before. What may have seemed like a small mistake, whether it was, a 6 inch line, lining up 6 inches off of the hash when you're supposed to be on the hash. You thought those things didn't matter, but they did.
Right.
And so here was this endorsement that every detail mattered, that this is the most important thing that you love doing. Well, rip off the Band-Aid and go attack it in the weight room, attack it in recovery, and attack it especially when somebody dares step on the field to try and win a football game against you. And that was just a totally different way to approach the game.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I'm going to get back to Notre Dame a little bit. Can you give me kind of a non-athletic experience that was really memorable for you? One thing, as we get older, and you'll find this because you're still a young buck, but as you get older, like those things that you laughed at, or those things that you really didn't care about at school, all of a sudden become important. So when I was there, we would always make fun of those old guys that walked around with those green pants with the gold NDs all over, right? We're like, oh, look at those guys, they're so old. Well, guess what? We're those guys now. I'm
let's get a deal.
Go back.
Let's go, man.
That's the funny part. So just wanted to know if you had kind of a memorable experience that wasn't necessarily dealing with athletics.
Oh, many. I think the unique thing about Notre Dame, they make you room with a regular student. That was eye-opening, especially because my freshman dorm mate came from the suburbs of Chicago and said, hey, you're the first black person I've ever met. And I was like, what? And it was just so you're living with people who are equally as dedicated and equally as intense, but just their world experience is different when you've been in the locker room, right? But I'll never forget being in one of my favorite professors' classes, and we had to write a paper. And I spent, hours and hours after practice writing this paper. It was, one of the 3 big papers of the year. And so I got to the teaching professor who was handing out the teaching aide, who was handing out the reviews and graded the test. I got a D. And so I went in. He's like, if you guys anybody got questions, come into, all office hours. Man, I kicked open that door. I'm like, what the? I busted my ass on this, and I answered everything you said, and you gave me a D. And the teaching assistant said to me something I'll never forget. He said, but you didn't tell me what you thought. He said, you told me what we've taught you, but you didn't tell me what you thought. Your opinion is the difference between the D that you wrote and the A that's waiting to be written. And that to me was like, it totally disarmed me. The fact that my opinion, that I had failed to put my opinion based on these facts that I clearly demonstrated I knew, had cost me a grade. And that to me is a lesson that I don't believe a lot of people at other schools playing football get. And that to me is why college is so important. It teaches you how to think for yourself. And that's a skill that I think is really explains a lot of the issues that we see today across different conversations. But that moment to me was worth every reason why I went to Notre Dame, because I had not believed up until that point that I didn't know the power of my opinion and the ability I had to create one based on fact. And that's something that has driven me to great success far beyond that moment.
That is amazing. We're going to take a small break to hear about a new team that I joined recently, an executive search firm called Komar Partners. This is Chris Zorich. Being part of some very successful teams, what I valued most was the collaboration and the chance to work toward common goals. Komar, derived from the Gaelic word meaning collaboration. Komar Partners is a recognized leader in retained executive search, professional recruiting, and talent advisory services. We are trusted advisors to our clients. We view our work on behalf of our clients as mission critical, and with the knowledge that a great resulting hire will have a direct effect on our clients' businesses. It's time to collaborate, cultivate, and connect. Why choose Komar Partners? The difference is clear. We lean in and have a tenacious approach to our work through innovation, knowledge management, process execution, and an industry-leading team of professionals. As part of every search, we provide a compensation analysis, a third-party executive assessment, and one-on-one onboarding and acculturation coaching. Welcome back. You're listening to the Zorich Podcast with our guest, Ryan Harris. If you'd like to watch this interview or our other interviews, please check out my YouTube page at Chris Zorich 50 and click subscribe. So I'm just amazed because you've accomplished so much at such a young age. And I think you became aware of what you were doing, like I said, as a freshman at Notre Dame, understanding kind of what you can do, what your limitations really were and what they weren't. So I think that's great. Where does this kind of idea of leadership come from for you? Did somebody sit down and say, hey, these are these three things? And I know in the book you list 7, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, the one thing that I started realizing was, when you choose your mindset and you're taking action in those spaces where people are, looking back at what happened instead of what you can do. And I always say, and I built my mindset with the words, I am, I can, I will. Hey, I am face down in the mud right now. I can quit. I can give up. I can go home. I can get up and I can kick somebody's tail for doing it on the next play. I will kick their tail the next play. And so I started realizing, a lot of people would try to, affect me because I just didn't care about failure. I wasn't deterred by my age or my size, and so I realized that I was scaring people who were comfortable. And really, leadership for me formed, into the year when we won the Super Bowl. I came back to the Broncos, and then also being around Mike Tomlin. And one of the things he said to me in a conversation, we would have talks almost every day. He said, Ryan, if you want to be successful, get used to being lonely. And for me, I just didn't care about being alone because, there aren't a lot of astronauts who've gone to the moon. Would you rather be, lonely and be one of those people, or have a bunch of friends and, not go to the moon? So I just knew that what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it, was so unique that I couldn't rely on other people's approval for me to go and accomplish what I wanted. And because of that, because I was choosing my mindset, continually in motion, never knew a defeat, even in the face of defeat, people look to you when people want to know what action to take. And right. So choosing your mindset and believing in your abilities, you're going to be a leader because of what you're doing.
And it's so interesting because it sounds, and I'm sure, you've been around some great coaches, but it sounds like, that was manifested at a young age, which I think is great. Because as I was reading the book, I started to kind of think about what leadership meant to me. And I started to think about like, wow, when I was in high school, X, Y, and Z happened. And people started to kind of look at me differently. And
yeah.
I was elected captain. And I never knew why. Like, and back then, I think the coach would kind of find me. It wasn't voting like it was at Notre Dame. I think the coach kind of identified, no, hey, I want you, and you. You guys be leading captains. But, it was so weird because as time went on, unlike you, I didn't play all 4 years. So, I mean, when I got there as a freshman, I was like, man, I think I fooled everybody because I got a scholarship. This is great. And never thought I would play. But fast forward a couple of years, I'm elected captain again. So I'm really kind of, I love the idea and love to hear people's different takes on leadership. Because I think that, I mean, not only can anyone be a leader, but you see it in the most kind of simple and understated ways. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Understated, like you said. I mean, I always say lead with an example, because leading by an example, a lot of context is missed, right? Chris, you never got blocked. That's crazy, man. How did you never get blocked? I both know that's not true. But what did you do when you were getting blocked too much? That's something where, okay, now it's a different deal, and so what I did the year we won the Super Bowl, I interacted with a teammate who was struggling, and everybody, guys are screaming at him on the field, coaches are yelling at him, and I walked up to him and said, hey man, listen, when I was your age, I used to make 2 to 3 mistakes a game. I started feverishly taking notes, and now I make 2 to 3 mistakes a year. And I just walked away. And the next day he had, 5 pens and pencils and a notebook on his desk. You have to give people examples and engage with those who you work with, rather than saying, hey, catch up. Peyton Manning was our quarterback. We couldn't catch up to him and how he processed the game. And I'm so glad he didn't just, leave us alone. He would engage with us in meetings. Hey, what are we thinking here, offensive line? Hey, 3rd down, we're looking for this, right, Emmanuel Sanders? And so that engagement is the piece that takes you from a good leader to a great leader.
So you've had a very interesting yet long NFL career. You've had some ups and downs, obviously capping that with a Super Bowl win. But share with us kind of the idea of not giving up, right? I mean, the idea of having to face some injuries, having to be cut. What do? You talk in the book, you talk about kind of driving home after you got cut and kind of thinking, what's next?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a long, full, painful career, but 9 surgeries in 10 years. And, I got drafted to the Broncos, was playing great, and, had an injury, total toe replacement. Right when I got to Denver, I had my second back surgery. I had one at Notre Dame. And then I had to have a toe surgery when I was literally a game away from a $3 million bonus. Got a new coach who wanted me to do new things, and I thought I was already successful. I didn't have to learn. I didn't have to listen. And because of that, they released me. And never was I more humiliated in my life. I thought, how am I going to tell my wife in our first year of marriage that I lost my job because I was arrogant and unwilling? Right. Right. How do I go to the grocery store without being a Denver Bronco? These are real questions I had, and tears just flowing from my face and my hands shaking in disbelief as I drove away. But I decided in that moment that this was going to be the best thing for my career. I am good enough to play in the NFL. I can make sure I never lose my job again because of my unwillingness and because of my selfishness and because I'm distracted. And I will not be distracted again. I will work to be a champion. And when I went to Houston, the very next morning I got a call from my coach at the time, Gary Kubiak in Houston. He said, hey, Ryan, I need you. I think you can help us play down here in Houston, help us win. Hey, I can do that, coach. And so I put in the extra time, and 99% of my friends in Denver didn't call me at all when I was in Houston because I couldn't do anything for them. That was another great moment to learn about how much time I was wasting on people who didn't deserve my time. Wow. And so sure enough, played 2 years in Houston, played in Kansas City. Kansas City said, hey, Ryan, we like you. We just don't think you have any football left. Well, I chose my mindset again. I am going to prepare. I can help a team win a championship. I will be ready for the call. And I was when Gary Kubiak called me again. This time he was with the Denver Broncos that had released me earlier. And he said, hey, Ryan, I need you. I need you to come help us win a championship. I need you to show these young cats how to work. I can do that, coach. So I just learned that my mindset and was everything. And people will lie to you all the time, right? People will lie to you about what you're capable of.
Oh yeah.
Kansas City Chiefs lied to me when they thought I didn't have any football left. And it was fun. I'll tell you what, it was great to make the relationships. You might know Andy Heck. I think you played a little bit with him. And, he made me a tough player. But, hey, winning that championship the next year, I was like, hey, Chief, good to see you. I saw them when I was with the Steelers. And, I made sure to wear my ring to the game and saw those guys after. But I was proud of myself for not believing other people when they had an opinion about me when I knew the facts. And that's what I brought with me to Pittsburgh, and that's what I brought with me beyond my career into broadcasting, speaking, real estate, and whatnot.
And what's really nice is that, Ryan has been able to really put a lot of this in his book. Again, I'm going to give you another plug, Mindset Over Mastery. And I think it's great. It's really a great read. It's a quick read. And I got his website up, so you guys can go check out his website and get it from there, or either go to Amazon. I got it off Amazon. I hope I didn't.
You can get them both. Thank you. Yeah.
Sure. The idea that, you're kind of telling the quote unquote secrets on how to be successful. I mean, I look at it as kind of like letting everyone know that, and it's great that you're doing this, how to be successful literally at every level. And I learned some things from it. And one of the things I loved about it was you talked about picking up your shovel and digging. And I thought that was great because you have this great, kind of tell the story behind that.
Yeah, well, in our Super Bowl 50 ring, there's over 200 diamonds in it, and none of them were laying around to be picked up. My father-in-law was a miner and a geologist, and at times they had to use the light on their helmet to try and dig a hole to see to the other side, to see where they were going. And so often we get in these places, and we've heard the term, there's no end in sight. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. Well, there is if you create it, right? And you have to dig for your diamonds. And I get it all. I saw it with teammates. You've seen it with teammates of yours, whether it's people outside. Shockingly, it happens a lot outside. Mike Tomlin calls people, comfort seekers. Some people are comfort seekers. And for me, you have to dig for your diamonds, even if you don't know if it's going to end up in success or not. One of the things Larry King just passed, and he said to Chris Cuomo at one point, you don't sound like much of a fighter worrying about whether you'll win or lose. And so if you can just surrender the outcome, right? I wanted to be a great football player, and I trained to be great, and I believed I would win a Super Bowl. And had I not, I would still be okay, right? But too often we want to know things are going to work out. I want to know if I do this, I'm going to get this job. I want to know if I ask this person to marry me that they're going to say yes. You can't have that kind of knowledge on a football field. And so for me, just encouraging people to dig, educate yourself, add a skill. I'm learning coding. I'm learning about mortgages in terms of, mortgage or becoming a mortgage or a loan originator. Knowledge never goes wasted. I had to relearn how to breathe playing with Peyton Manning, right? I had to dig some more, even when I got to be Peyton Manning's teammate. So I went to an MMA coach who taught me, hey, breathe in for 5, swallow the breath, out for 8, and those things changed me. So you have to keep digging no matter how much light is there, whether you know where that tunnel is going, pick up a shovel and dig for your diamonds.
I love it. And that story can be heard again in Mindset Over Mastery. So please check out the book. So I have to know how it was when you're on the field after you won a Super Bowl. I've never had that opportunity. I am obviously jealous of that. But, what was that? When you see that final 0 tick, please tell us.
The scream comes from your pinky toe through the top of your dome. And, everything you believed about yourself comes true for other people. Oh. And there's confetti going everywhere. And I remember looking at my family and screaming, and my hands are up. And then I turned around and I'm walking through the confetti, and it's just like I entered a wormhole. I didn't know which way was up. It's like the movie Interstellar, I'm just going through. And you'll identify with this, though, Chris, is that at the end of the game, it was immediate sadness because here's this team that we have, one of the greatest, teams the greatest team I'd ever been on. And we weren't going to be together after this anymore. It was going to look different. I mean, it already started to, with family running on the field. And, I hugged a couple of my teammates and we're, giving high fives. And all of a sudden my mom and my dad and my wife were on the field. It's like, after you're just on fire, everything is, you're still sweating from the game and there's confetti getting stuck on your back and, high five. And then all of a sudden there's Tim Cook from Apple. I'm like, hey, Tim, you want to get a photo? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. So we took a photo and he's like, send it to me at tcook@apple.com. And, I'm like, what? And so it's just like, and then you're sitting there and you see the trophy and, and then all of a sudden it's like, I gotta go shower. I'm hungry, So then this like your life is totally different and yet you need to do the same things. Right. So I went and showered. I got back to the hotel and what was funny is at the hotel party, a lot of the family was, Flo Rida was doing a concert and, the family's dancing and doing stuff. All the players were eating. We hadn't eaten for 6.5 hours, So it was just such a unique experience. It was such a great team, a team that cared about what's best versus what's best for me, and a team I learned a ton of lessons on that I carry with me with joy and a ton of stories.
The interesting thing you talk about that, and that's what I thought you were going to say. It's so funny because everybody assumes that in the euphoria, it's this, you're thinking about this, you're thinking about that. And at this point you're like, wow, the game's over, our season's over. Hey, no more practice, which is probably good and bad, right?
Great. Yeah.
Yeah. But then you're talking about like all of a sudden you start seeing different things, right? Your family's on the field. All of a sudden it's like, wow, okay, so this is over. Now, I was fortunate enough to win a national championship in college, right? And after the game, we came back to the hotel and we actually went to a mass.
Mm.
And I thought that was one of the most surreal things because like you, we had confetti. I mean, all the stuff was going on. It was great. We put Holtz on our shoulders and everything was great. And we finally accomplished that goal. And then it was so interesting. It was like players and family went to a mass. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, this is unreal. Like I've never heard of this before. Like I remember we're supposed to be partying, we're supposed to be popping champagne and everything. But it was just kind of that surreal moment because I felt like, wow, and again, I mean, I thought this was going to happen every year. It wound up not happening, but it was just one of those moments where I'll never forget it because it was like, this is such kind of a weird moment. And it was such a different moment than what people assume, right? Yeah. People assume you're popping champagne. It's like, you guys are eating. Are you kidding me?
Eating.
You haven't eaten.
Hungry.
In hours, all of a sudden, everybody's partying. You're like, no, I'm hungry. Please stop. And so it's so funny because I don't think it really, and at least for me, it really didn't sink in until we had a chance to kind of get our rings. And I've seen several photos with you with yours, and it's beautiful. And so, it was one of those things for me that kind of proved to it that hey, this actually happened versus kind of, a couple months ago we won a game.
Yeah, and it's strange to explain to people too. You're not different in that moment, but everything about you is different in that moment.
Right.
And that's really such a weird thing. It's like, well, I visualized raising the trophy. So when I did it, like that's what I've been working to do. And so there's this really weird disconnect of, well, this is who I've been. And for everyone else, it's, well, this is who you are now. Wow, congratulations. And it's so unique. And I must say, I do think it's tougher to win a national championship in college football, my man. It's just so much tougher to me. Maybe the hits aren't as intense, but to me, that's more of an accomplishment because it's just so unique, the college football landscape and the time off between games.
Sure, you're being so very kind. I do appreciate that coming from a man who won a Super Bowl. Thank you so much, Ryan. I appreciate that. One of the things that we've kind of seen high school, college, pro is this idea of being in or being around good coaches. Tell me your idea about being around a good culture, right? I mean, culture is important. Share with us kind of what you've kind of seen over the years and what you think good culture is.
Yeah, good culture is creating the space for failure to succeed. And I can tell you, I had one coach who was a bad coach. That's something we really don't talk about, right? I didn't realize that there were bad coaches until I was, in the pros. And in the pros, we could say to the coach, hey, you're a bad coach. Don't bleep and talk to me because I know what I'm bleeping doing. It's a different world in the NFL. But, one of the things that made us so successful when we won the Super Bowl, and something I thought more players had, but I realized didn't, before every game, Gary Kubiak would say, men, there are no mistakes today. If you make a mistake on that field, that's on us as coaches for not getting you prepared. You go play fast, you go have fun, and you make sure your personality shows. You have total freedom as a player versus another coach that would all week, they're going to kick your tail if you do this. You cannot fail here. You have to be perfect here. Well, that's great when things are going well, and that's when you'll see teams blow out a team 52-17. But what happens when things don't go well? What did you by making your team so afraid to make a mistake? Maybe you have them play perfect, but you and I know that's a perfect game doesn't exist. Right. And so that's when you see those teams who win 52-17 lose 25-7 the next week because their coach and their culture didn't give them anywhere to go when failure happened, right? Mm-hmm. And so understand your culture has to make sure, whether that's in banking, teaching, whatever it is, you have to have a place for failure. You have to put that on you as a leader, and that's how you succeed. If you fail in the culture that we're working in, I'm gonna approach you and let's have an honest conversation. Hey, what happened? Okay, how can I help with? Okay, now if I've given you the materials, if you know what happened, and now you're making the same mistake, well, either you're not listening or it's not important, and for both of those reasons, you're fired. And so, create that in culture where you can fail. Hey, by the way, I failed like that. Here's what I did. And that's how you create success. This whole world of being perfect and hiring the perfect person, that's only going to get you so far. Elite levels of performance happen when failure can be overcome, and the people have tools to overcome that failure from their leaders.
I love that. You made a very interesting transition. Have you always wanted to get into broadcasting? I mean, were you doing kind of like were you the high school reporter after the season? I mean, what happened?
I at first, Chris, man, I just said, what can I do and stay in my sweatpants after I'm done playing? And that was sports radio. I grew up on sports radio, KFAN in Minnesota. Okay. But I also realized through my time at Notre Dame, through all my years in the NFL, winning a championship, I have a doctorate in applied football mechanics and theory, and so I want to use that to help people to educate and humanize the game people love. I can do that in a radio booth. I can do that on my radio show. I do that as a speaker, went to Google to speak to their staff about financial literacy. The moment I walk in as a Black millionaire to talk about financial literacy, it's a different conversation. And so for me to be able to have an impact, one with my presence, but two with my experience that has taken me across this country, I wanted to give that to people. I wanted to make sure that I make an impact, one, at home with my wife and my children, but two, in my community here in Denver and at large. And how can I do that? I can do that through sports where it doesn't matter if I'm Black or I'm Muslim or if I'm young or I'm old or I'm fat or I'm skinny. We can create this utopia on the airwaves, and I can talk to you, all of your team members of whatever speech that I go to. And so in this way, I just wanted to see how many places I could make an impact while being a champion at home and abroad.
So now this is, I believe it was it 3 years ago you had the opportunity to start being the analyst at Notre Dame?
Yeah.
Okay, so what was that opportunity like? And by the way, you're coming back home for the season, and by the way, you're literally living the life of an adult football player, like an adult Notre Dame football player. That has to be awesome.
Oh man, it was the best. At first I didn't know what the opportunity was. I know that they just said, "Hey Ryan, we're thinking about having you as part of the broadcast. Would you be interested?" And I was like, "Sure." But for me, I get to go to all these cities that I had, immense stress in,
Sure,
whether
exactly.
it was as a pro or as a college player,
Exactly.
right? Like, when we played the Chargers, I didn't get to see San Diego. I was
never went out. Right.
We got in at 5:30. We had a meeting at 7.
Yep.
We had bed at 10. So like I surfed for 3 hours before the USC game 2 years ago. And I've made it a point to find the good tailgates and to get the tailgate passes. You know what I'm saying? So I'm full but more than anything, Chris, going back to Notre Dame, every single time I go back, I appreciate it more. I appreciate the people like you, people who don't play sports, people who change the world, through business, through teaching, through faith. I just am so welcome at home, and I just feel normal at Notre Dame, and it's been fun for me. I brought my father-in-law, who's usually talks all the time. He didn't say a word. Wow. And after the game, I said to him, hey, what do you think? And he just, he's got, his eyes are welling up, and he says, the people. Where did these people come from?
Wow.
And you and I know that's everything about Notre Dame. So not only do I get to surf, but I'm getting to come home and be around and then share Notre Dame with people and share the stories of guys like Jerry Tillery, who studied Japanese while in his senior year. It's such a unique place, and I'm just so thankful for the opportunity to tell the stories of the young athletes and be a part of Notre Dame, a school that means everything to me.
So as we're going to wrap up now, but one of the things I think are literally on everybody's mind right now is, this is going to be a two-part question. The first part is, what did you think about the 2020 football season, college football season?
Yeah, I'm just so thankful at the leadership that, Jack Swarbrick at Notre Dame, the ACC, the SEC, those two leagues really made an effort for their football programs to go forward. And that ended up, giving so much joy to people across the country. It gave us a sense of normalcy in the most unnormal of times.
Right.
Just to think we had no idea about a mask, let alone that we would be affected by a pandemic. And so we were going through so much change. Parents, are your kids at school? Are you teaching your kids? Can you see your parents? Is somebody infected? Right. And to be able to watch football, whether that was Alabama, USC, Notre Dame, just giving people something to look at and to unify behind was huge. And I think the NCAA did maybe the first good thing they've ever done in allowing students to have a free year, because last year you didn't know if they were going to play 4 games or 14 games.
Right. All right. So here's the last question. Again, this is on everybody's mind. What do you think about the 2021 season for Notre Dame football team?
It's going to be really interesting. They're losing some big pieces. There are some young receivers, though, that are going to be coming back that could make it interesting. A transfer from Wisconsin, too, at quarterback. But you're losing Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Kyle Hamilton is, I think, one of the best defensive players I've ever seen. So you'll have a great safety there. Kurt Hinish is coming back. But, for the next season, the one thing people aren't talking about, how are players going to handle distractions again, right? Because when you're in a pandemic season and maybe you see your parents, I know people who, their parents would just bring them takeout and they would stand outside of their dorm talking to their parents. Well, what happens now when, there are people in class and there are distractions outside of the field? And after going through a year where you were distraction free, do you have the control to stay focused? And that's going to go far beyond Notre Dame, but to every single athlete of when things go back to normal, can you stay focused? It's going to be a huge test that I don't think anybody's paying attention to.
Yeah. Ryan, this was awesome, man. Hopefully after the next season, you'll have a chance to come back on. This was some really, really exciting stuff for me. I would love to have had a chance to dive a little bit more deeper into your book, but I am not Joe Rogan, and this is not like a 4-hour podcast, so I do apologize about that.
Hey, all good. Hey, and I can't wait. Hopefully I get to ride with you guys. I got my motorcycle license a couple of years ago. So
nice. That's awesome.
I'll rent one down in South Bend, man. We can just go around the campus. That would be sick, man. And thanks for having me, Chris. You're the best.
Tony, Pat, Tim, Ryan, we will definitely recruit you to be one of the Riding Irish.
Yeah, man. Well, I was another Notre Dame guy who got me kind of into motorcycles, and so, man, there's nothing like hitting the clutch, man, and going. So I hope to join you legends one day.
Oh, wow, you are so kind, dude. Thank you so much, man. I really, really appreciate that. This is very exciting for me because I have a chance to kind of talk to a living legend and also someone who has kind of really made a difference in the lives of the young Notre Dame players. I think having a chance to kind of look up to you, being a former player, you're always around. I think that's one of the most important things that I like about your experience about being on the radio is that these guys have a chance to kind of see someone like you, and they could model what they want to do after their careers from you. And I know a lot of folks might not tell you that, but as a kid who really kind of didn't have a lot of role models when I was at Notre Dame, for you having a chance to kind of always be there for our student athletes is really, really encouraging.
Well, thank you, man. Thank you for the kind words. But I learned that because of Aaron Taylor and yourself and Rice and Reggie Brooks. I mean, you guys have been around, and it makes a difference. It made a difference in my life. I've looked up to you since stepping on campus, and it's my job, it's my duty to be there, as Aaron Taylor says, to be the library. If anybody wants a book on something, I'm happy to recommend it. But I learned that from Aaron, yourself, and many others. So may we continue to serve and to serve greatly.
Absolutely, I love it. Thank you very much to Ryan. I'd like to thank everyone listening on Facebook and YouTube, and most of all, my wonderful wife and daughter team of Candy and Kylie for helping me direct and produce the show. This podcast, along with my other ones, will be on my YouTube page at Chris Zorich 50, and please press the subscribe button. Ryan, thank you so much, man. This has been awesome. I do appreciate it. I look forward to hopefully doing it again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Chris. Go Irish.
All right, brother. Go Irish.